Russia isn't a European nation, it's a Siberian nation that just thinks it's European. Go look at a map. The landmass of Russia is 3/4 Asian, not European. The cities of Moscow and St. Petersburg might face westward, but the real Russia, the vast icy body of the nation, stretches 5,000 miles to the east in Siberia. For most of history, this was a land of nothing, a frozen hell where the Tsars exiled their worst offenders to die. A land so harsh it was never fully inhabited, even though it's larger than the United States and Europe combined. But here's what's turning everything on its head: climate change. It's proving that Russia's future isn't in Europe, it's in Siberia. And what was once the world's largest freezer is quietly on its way to becoming the next great frontier. The permafrost, frozen for thousands of years, is thawing, revealing untold riches and unspeakable secrets from the Soviet era. Ancient trade routes, frozen solid for millennia, are now opening up. Trillions of dollars worth of resources are suddenly within reach. And Russia is making a calculated bet that while the world panics about global warming, Siberia will make them the preeminent power of the 21st century. So here's the question nobody is asking. What happens when the world's biggest frozen landscape becomes the world's most valuable real estate? Because right now, while we're all focused on Ukraine, NATO, and European security, something much bigger is happening in the Russian Far East, and it's going to change everything. To understand what's happening now, you have to understand what Siberia is. Geographically, it's mind-boggling. 5 million square miles from the Ural Mountains to the Pacific Ocean. That's about 77% of Russia's total landmass. To put that in perspective, Siberia is larger than Canada, larger than Australia, and almost twice the size of the continental United States. And yet, it only has 33 million people. That's the population of California in an area the size of a continent. But Siberia wasn't always Russian, and it was certainly not always empty. For thousands of years, it was home to dozens of different native peoples. They were highly developed civilizations, perfectly adapted to one of the most inhospitable regions on the planet. They developed reindeer herding, trade systems, and cultures centered on surviving temperatures that regularly dropped to -60 degrees. Then came the Russians. Starting in the late 16th century, Russian Cossacks began moving eastward for one reason: fur. Sable pelts were more valuable than gold, and Siberia was full of them. The conquest was brutal and efficient. Native populations were subjugated, forced to pay tribute in fur, and slaughtered if they resisted. By 1639, Russian explorers had reached the Pacific Ocean. In less than 60 years, Russia had achieved the greatest territorial gain in human history. It took the United States 300 years to go from coast to coast. Russia did it in 2 generations. But conquering Siberia and colonizing it were 2 different things. Nobody wanted to move there voluntarily, so the Tsars repurposed Siberia as a tool of punishment. By the 17th century, Siberia had become synonymous with exile. Criminals, political rivals, and religious dissidents were sent not to prisons, but to remote settlements to live out their lives in isolation. Dostoevsky was exiled there. Lenin was exiled there. Millions who crossed the Romanovs ended their lives in the frozen East. The Soviets later industrialized this system. The Gulag Archipelago, made famous by Solzhenitsyn, was a sprawling network of forced labor camps across Siberia. Millions of prisoners were worked to death building railroads, mining gold, and cutting timber under conditions so brutal that just surviving was an act of defiance. The Trans-Siberian Railway, often praised as an engineering marvel, was built partly by forced labor. Entire cities rose from the ice, built by prisoners who knew they would never leave. And here's what rarely gets mentioned. Those camps are still there. The buildings, the infrastructure, the mass graves, all of it remains, slowly re-emerging as the permafrost melts. In recent years, thawing ice has revealed bodies perfectly preserved for decades. Entire abandoned work camps are surfacing like archaeological discoveries from a dystopian past. Climate change in Siberia isn't just an environmental crisis. It's a reckoning with historical trauma long buried under ice. For decades, Siberia has been described as empty, useless, and too cold to matter. That narrative was always false. Siberia isn't empty. It's sparsely populated, and it's far from worthless. It's one of the most resource-rich regions on Earth, something the Soviets understood well enough to build massive industrial cities in the middle of nowhere. Take Norilsk, a city of 175,000 people built above the Arctic Circle in one of the most polluted places on the planet. Why build a city there? Because beneath it lies one of the world's largest deposits of nickel, copper, and palladium. Operating since the 1930s, Norilsk's mines and smelters produce roughly 1% of global GDP. The environmental damage is extreme: black snow, poison soil, and a low life expectancy. But the economic payoff has always outweighed the cost in the eyes of the state. Or consider Yakutsk, the coldest city on Earth. Winter temperatures average -40 degrees Fahrenheit, yet 300,000 people live there. Why? Diamonds. The Mir mine near Yakutsk is one of the largest diamond mines in the world. A vast open pit so enormous it generates its own weather patterns. The Soviet Union built an entire city in the coldest inhabited place on the planet because the resources justified it. These aren't exceptions. Siberia holds roughly 30% of the world's natural gas reserves, 20% of its gold, and vast quantities of coal, iron ore, and uranium. Lake Baikal alone contains about 20% of the planet's fresh water. Siberia's forests form the largest carbon sink on Earth after the Amazon. This is not a wasteland. It's a resource vault, sealed shut by climate and distance. But that seal is breaking. Permafrost covers about 65% of Russia's land, and it's melting faster every year. Ground frozen for 10,000 years is turning to mud. Buildings are collapsing, roads are warping, and pipelines are rupturing. Yet this thaw also creates opportunity. Mineral deposits once unreachable are becoming viable. Construction costs are falling. And most critically, the Northern Sea Route is opening. The Northern Sea Route changes everything. For centuries, Russia's Arctic coastline was a maritime graveyard, clogged with ice. Climate change is transforming it into a potential global shipping superhighway. The route connects Europe and Asia over the top of Russia, cutting the distance from Rotterdam to Shanghai by roughly 40% compared to the Suez Canal. That means a 34-day journey shrinks to about 23. Fewer days mean less fuel, lower costs, and faster delivery. Russia is investing billions to make this a reality. New ports are under construction. A massive fleet of around 40 icebreakers, many of them nuclear-powered, is being deployed. For comparison, the United States has just 2. Moscow wants this to be a major global trade artery. But control of the route is deeply contested. Russia claims it passes through its territorial waters, giving Moscow the right to regulate and tax traffic. The United States and others argue it should be an international strait. This is a fight over who controls one of the future's most important trade routes. At the same time, an Arctic land grab is underway. Russia has spent years mapping the Arctic seabed, claiming underwater ridges link its territory to the North Pole. In 2007, Russian submarines planted a titanium flag on the seabed beneath the pole. The reason is simple: resources. The U.S. Geological Survey estimates the Arctic holds 13% of the world's undiscovered oil and 30% of its undiscovered natural gas. Russia's Arctic alone may contain $30 trillion worth of untapped resources. But demographics complicate the picture. Russia's population is shrinking, particularly in its European core. Meanwhile, other populations are growing. Chinese migration into Russia's Far East is rising. Across the border in China's northeast, more than 100 million people live. The imbalance is profound. Migration from Central Asia is also reshaping Siberian cities, filling labor shortages. And the indigenous peoples never left. Yakuts, Buryats, and many others still live on their ancestral lands. As Siberia's value rises, questions of land rights and resource control are becoming unavoidable. Warmer temperatures are expanding Siberian agriculture. Land once too cold to farm is now producing crops. An ice-free Northern Sea Route offers enormous economic and strategic advantages. Arctic resources give Russia leverage in global energy markets. This creates a perverse incentive. Why aggressively fight global warming when it's unlocking shipping routes and trillions in resources? But the risks are staggering. Thawing permafrost releases vast amounts of methane, a potent greenhouse gas. Ancient bacteria and viruses are emerging. In 2016, a boy in Siberia died after anthrax was released from thawed reindeer carcasses. Infrastructure is sinking into the ground. The cost of adaptation could ultimately exceed the gains. Siberia is no longer just a symbol of exile, it's the next great frontier. A colossal territory, rich in resources, opening up at a moment of global instability. Russia's wager is clear. While the world struggles, Siberia will fuel Russian power. But this transformation raises profound questions. Who will live there? Who will control the wealth? What is the environmental cost of awakening a land frozen for millennia? The answers will shape the 21st century. You can focus on Ukraine and European politics all you want. But the real story is unfolding in the frozen north and east, where climate change is rewriting geography, economics, and power. Russia was never truly a European country. And as Siberia stirs from its long frozen sleep, the world is about to remember that. The only question is whether the rest of us are ready for what comes next. Thanks for watching.